Mail and Guardian investigative journalist Adriaan Basson was part of the team that covered the corruption saga of former police chief Jackie Selebi. Now he has written a book about the scandal that rocked the country. It's called Finish and Klaar. Adriaan, tell us why the title?
Well, Finishing Klaar, as I call it, was really the ringtone of the story. You have to remember that Jackie Selebi, after being confronted by the Mail and Guardian in May 2006 about his relationship with Glenn Agliati, said, "He's my friend, Finish and Klaar." I think looking back, Selebi will now think that was a big mistake to admit his relationship with this guy who later proved to be a drug dealer. So yes, that was really for me the quote of the trial of this whole saga. Jackie Selebi admitting quite early in the saga that he is friends with this very scaly character called Glenn Agliati.
Tell us what the book is about in a nutshell.
What I tried to do, Varashni, was to tell the story of Jackie Selebi, his career as police chief starting in 1999, being appointed as the first black police commissioner, a big challenge and a big honor. And at that stage he was a civil servant, he was a diplomat, did very well and was highly regarded. And how he got into the police and trying to explain how he got corrupted, through all the evidence and the information that's come from the trial and before the trial. So that was really the aim of the book, to explain to people the whole story of Jackie Selebi. I think it's problematic to only see him as this corrupt guy. It was for me interesting to find out how he started, and then obviously we all know where he ended and will probably end. So yes, I think the book tells a story. It's built around the corruption trial of Selebi, around his conviction and his sentencing, but it also goes back and traces his past in exile and his career as a policeman.
So that's quite a holistic view. How long did it take you to write all of this?
Well, my publishers and I did this book in record speed. It took about 3 months for the entire process to finish. So yes, I was lucky. I was covering the corruption trial for the Mail and Guardian. So I had all this information in my head, and at that moment I also had access to all the court records and transcripts. So it was quite easy to just pack together and tell the whole story. I mean, that was really my aim, to tell it in a narrative way as a story and for people to understand it. And I think that helped a lot in doing it so quickly.
3 months is very quick indeed. But what was the most difficult part of writing this book for you?
I think the most difficult part was exactly what I referred to earlier, is that, coming with a prejudice against Selebi, thinking of him immediately as this corrupt guy and having to kind of, go back into history and try and find out who this guy was, reading pieces that people wrote about him in the late 90s, wonderful pieces about this guy, the stuff that he did at the United Nations, his tenure at the Department of Foreign Affairs. So it was really to open my mind and to go back in history and look at this guy and trace his steps. And then also the other difficult thing was trying to figure out how it happened. And I still don't have a foolproof answer. It's impossible to say what was going on in someone else's head. But that was really difficult to find out and to establish how this, what looked like respectable, clean, honest man became corrupt.
What does this book mean for the country?
I think there are very serious lessons to take from this book and from this episode for the country. I think it's a wake-up call for people in high places like the police commissioner's office, how easily they can be corrupted. Jackie Selebi, just after he started as police commissioner, he was already, in a few months later, he was cornered by some criminals. So it's a wake-up call for the country. But I also think, the way the Scorpions handled this case and the way they prosecuted it shows the importance of having an independent investigative capability to especially investigate and prosecute corruption, which we don't have at the moment. I think those are really the two more important things to take from this episode, and to amplify how important it is to tackle corruption in high echelons of power. Jackie Selebi was the most powerful and highly placed ANC figure to be convicted of corruption after 1994. And I think the lessons learned from the story and the fact that the police commissioner could get away with this for so long is a hard lesson for all of us and an historic chapter in our history. So yes, I do think it's good to have an understanding of how this happened, not to be repeated, but also just to document this very important chapter in our history.
And for yourself personally, you've been part of the coverage of the corruption, the trial, now the book. What have you taken from this personally?
Look, I think, I start the book also by saying working journalists in South Africa don't write books. We chase stories, we write them, and we have a beer, and our stories end up wrapping fish and chips the next day. And I think it's more important, the amount and the magnitude of the stories that we tell every day in South Africa is so huge and overwhelming. We often need to just pause for a moment and maybe think of documenting those stories into more lasting forms, like books. And that was really, for me, a very grateful exercise and fulfilling exercise to be able to tell the story in book form, trace the story from the beginning to end. So I hope more journalists will be inspired to do the same, because there are such amazing stories around.
Thank you, Adriaan.